feared God, nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?"
Have you ever faced a time in your life when things seem so hopeless? They seem so bleak. Things seem so insurmountable that you felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel. So you might as well just cash in your chips, throw in the towel, stop believing that things can be different, and simply give up. You ever felt like that? Nobel Peace Prize recipient Alexander Solzhenitsyn writes that many years in the prison camps of Russia were full of back-breaking labor, slow starvation, and bleakness beyond description. And one day, Solzhenitsyn tells of reaching a very despondent moment, and in his hopelessness, because it became so pronounced, he simply decided to give up. He stopped working. He sat down on the ground, knowing that a guard would tell him to get back to work, and when he didn't, the end to his suffering would come quite quickly when the guard would come and beat him to death. Now, Solzhenitsyn says, as he sat with his head down only for a moment, he awaited the blow from that guard's gun when suddenly he felt a presence nearby. And when he looked up, he saw not a husky Russian guard, but instead he saw a skinny old prisoner who squatted down beside him and with a small stick began to draw a cross in the dirt at Solzhenitsyn's feet. And then when finished, without saying a word, that old skinny prisoner simply walked away. Solzhenitsyn commented on this years later in one of his writings when he said, "When I stared at that cross on the ground, the old prisoner had risked his life to draw for me. Something remarkable happened. At that moment, I knew that there was something greater than the evil I saw in the prison camp. At that moment, I knew there was something greater than the Soviet Union. For the drawing of that cross reminded me that the power of that cross and what it represented meant that anything and everything was possible in this world. And so I got back up, I picked up my shovel, and I went to work." Now, I don't know about you, but what moves me about this story is that despite seeing that cross, nothing really changed for Solzhenitsyn on the outside. There was still the bleakness, there was still the horror, there was still the danger of that Russian prison camp that was looming around him. But because of that cross and what it represented, everything changed for Solzhenitsyn on the inside. For Solzhenitsyn, that cross drawn by that old skinny prisoner in the sand at his feet inspired persistence. And that persistence saved Solzhenitsyn's life. Persistence, defined by Webster as the quality of continuing steadily despite the problems or difficulties that surround us, persistence. So let me ask, could you call yourself a persistent person? Well, I happen to think that the contemplation and the meaning and the power of persistence provides a wonderful starting point for us this morning as we attempt to understand this parable Joel read to you from Luke's Gospel. Because this parable of the widow and the judge, I would submit to you, is, among other things, all about the power of persistence. That quality of continuing steadily despite the problems and the difficulties that may be surrounding us. So let's set the scene. Jesus has been teaching his disciples for quite some time now about the bright days that are coming. The kingdom of God is at hand, he's told them. But these disciples seem a little suspect, shall we say, because all they see are storm clouds. They witness the ruthlessness of the Romans. They see the hunger. They see the oppression. They feel the bleakness of existence. In fact, these disciples now were feeling that everything they had been hoping for, everything they had been praying for to happen for them, well, it was not going to come to fruition. And for Jesus, this was a great challenge because he knows these disciples really haven't seen anything yet. They have yet to enter Jerusalem, where in a few weeks the power of love will clash with the power of domination, and in its wake their lives are going to be changed forever. And so Jesus' disciples are becoming weary of praying for a change, and they're skeptical about the outcome. And so Jesus feels he needs to tell them a parable. And what makes this parable different from all the other parables of Jesus is that where in most of Jesus' parables the meaning is left for us to determine, today's parable is unique because Luke starts right out at the beginning and tells us what it means. Then Jesus told the disciples a parable about their need to pray always and to not lose heart. That's what it says. So let's allow Albert Morse's words to retell a parable that we're supposed to hear according to Luke's gospel. So Jesus says to his disciples, once upon a time, there was this notorious judge, and this judge had power and status and money that kept him from seeing much further than the tip of his nose. And there was this widow who had been wronged, and this widow had no money, she had no influence, and she had no reason to believe that this judge would ever have a sudden, inexplicable reason to answer her prayer. So what hope did this woman truly have? Not much, not much. But there was one thing. There was one thing this woman did have, and that was that she would not give up. She keeps coming back to ask this judge for justice. She comes every morning and she sees that judge sitting in front of the great hall on a bench high and lifted up. And she marches the length of that building right up to the judge and she insists that he give her a fair judgment. And the first time she gives her speech, the judge thinks it's quite amusing. He smiles and he says, "Yeah, get lost." The second time it's less amusing, so he instructs the bailiff to walk her out. And each succeeding time, she becomes, shall we say, a bigger and bigger pain in the neck. Finally, the judge tells the widow to leave him alone. Stay away, forget it, you got no chance. But still, she keeps coming back. She stalks him. She walks up to the judge in Fresh Market when he's trying to buy a bag of onions. She waits for him outside the Jungle Club, and she nails him the moment he heads out of the building to go back to work. She follows him into the Tides restaurant, and she loudly speaks to him of what it is that she knows while all the diners are watching. The widow refuses to take the judge's no for an answer until finally, Jesus says, she simply wore him down. And so frustrated does he become that finally the judge says, "All right, already, I can't stand it anymore. I give up, you win. Whatever you need is yours." And that's the parable in a nutshell. The parable Jesus tells to frustrated and overwhelmed disciples. To these who are fearful of what they see around them, he holds up this persistent widow as kind of an example to the disciples of the kind of persistence that they should adopt, especially in their lives of prayer. because such persistent prayer will allow them to surmount all the difficulties he knows they are dealing with at that moment and all the difficulties that are to come, helping them to maintain a confidence and a belief and a hope in the future. And how do they glom on to that kind of power? How do they grab that kind of persistence? Well, we know from all the things Jesus has told the disciples up to this point that all they need to do is simply to have a little faith. Jesus says you only need really faith much like a little mustard seed, in fact, because that will be enough to fuel persistent prayer and help to see you through even the bleakest of times. So, do you think you have that? A little faith, I mean. Well, if so, then here's the good news. That's enough. That's enough to help you face whatever this world can throw your way. The broken relationship, the worry over children, the fast-moving disease, the financial struggles, the desire to pick up a drink, the passion to see legal justice prevail, or just the emptiness and loneliness and loss you feel at this moment. Just a little faith. That's all you need. Because according to Jesus, a small bit of faith is all that is needed to fuel ongoing, persistent prayer. Prayer which connects you to a power and a strength and a capacity far beyond yourself, keeping you connected to the bigness of God through whom all things are possible. Casey and I receive a lot of different kinds of magazines. She gets the Oxford Literary Review, I get Sports Illustrated. She gets the Harvard Review, I get Sports Illustrated. But one thing we have in common is we both receive the Christian Century. It's a magazine for clergy. It would bore you to death, but we love it. In the last Christian Century, author Stephanie Paulsell wrote a wonderful piece about Antoinette Tuft. I don't know if you know her name. She was the bookkeeper who saved that school full of teachers and children from harm at McNair Discovery School in Decatur, Georgia, some months ago when a man armed with an AK-47 and 500 rounds of ammunition entered the school, took her hostage, and told her he wasn't afraid to die. You remember her? Now how would you respond at that moment? Well, let me tell you what Antoinette did. First, she chose to rely on the training the school system had given her on how to get coded messages to her colleagues to let them know to lock down their rooms and get the children out of the building. Then she did what she could by sharing with the shooter her own experiences of hopelessness and struggle in life. But then we're told that Tuft relied on another training as well. For in an interview after that event, Tuft also noted that when facing this gunman, she also relied on something her pastor had taught her months before. Tuft said her pastor had taught her how to pray on the inside. Taught her, and I quote, how to anchor herself in God no matter what was going on around her. So Tuft said she knew. She knew to hang on to that anchor and to pray and to pray and to pray on the inside while doing her best on the outside to make the situation change. I mean, surely her mind and heart were racing. But she knew she needed to keep that gunman calm. She knew she needed to keep those children safe. She knew she needed to assure the police gathering outside that there was no need to shoot. And Tuft, this brave bookkeeper, did all of this on the outside while praying and praying and praying on the inside, choosing to anchor herself in God and stay afloat amidst the chaos. Do you know what FBI profilers said about that? They said that Tuft's calmness and confidence and hope made all the difference in diffusing what could have been a horrific situation. Yes, Jesus taught the disciples to pray always and not lose heart. And for me, it raises the question, so how good am I? How good are you? How good are we at praying without ceasing and never losing hope? Now, maybe you feel that diligent, unrelenting, ongoing, persistent prayer is just more than you have got the energy for right now. I understand that. I mean, maybe you're afraid if you try to do it, it will not yield such life-changing results as it did for Antoinette Toft. And folks, it's true. I'm not here to pull a wool over your eyes. Maybe you can't pray your way into world peace. Maybe you can't pray to end hunger or an instant solution to your own personal problems. But with this parable, Jesus is teaching us something significant. He is saying that persistence in prayer does eventually pay off. Maybe in unexpected ways, with unexpected and astonishing results. Because the most important changes we can affect by prayer are not on the outside. The most important changes come, in fact, on the inside of us. Frederick Buechner put it this way: persistence is the key in prayer, not because you have to beat a path to God's door before God will open it, but because until you beat that path, there may be no way of God getting to your door. Wow. Without that prayer, there may be no way of God getting to your door. Persistent prayer opens, it maintains, and it widens the path between you and God. So that way to God, that communication with God, becomes second nature, and it becomes very, very easy. In fact, with persistent prayer, after a while, you know what happens? The path between us and God becomes so easily traveled that we eventually, almost instinctively, we know how to find ourselves in God's presence, and we know instinctively how to rely on God's leading and healing. Now, I have no way of knowing what question you may need an answer to from God today, or what you've been praying about, if you have been praying. I have no idea to know what situation you may need reversed in your life. I don't know, but I do know this. Persistent prayer is the best way. Maybe it's the only way to keep you from losing heart while you wait for the ends you seek. So pray with vigor, pray with strength, pray with persistence. The gospel says, keep praying, don't lose heart. When your prayers feel foolish, keep praying. When you can't pray like you wish you could, keep praying. When you do not know what you should do with your life, then keep praying. When you have bad memories that simply won't go away, keep praying. When your addiction seems more powerful than you are, then keep praying. When it doesn't seem like depression will ever let you go, keep praying. When you finally understand that your greatest and cherished dream is not going to come true, keep praying. When your child is troubled and you do not know how to help, keep praying. When someone you love is a victim but will not do what you know they must, keep praying. When your boss is a little simple-minded and he's not getting any smarter, keep praying. When you see a homeless person on the corner and you know your dollar's not going to matter much, keep praying. When you realize that children starve every day and it does not have to happen, keep praying. When you cannot escape the truth that the world loves war and peacemakers do not get much attention, keep praying. Yes, Jesus says, keep praying. Through this parable, his words come across the centuries today and say to us, rely upon God and be persistent. Even though the world may look broken and unjust and corrupt, keep praying. For CNN may whine, Fox may rant, the New York Times may question, and the Wall Street Journal may claim. But our gospel story for today says, keep praying for this broken and beautifully shaken world. For if even an unjust judge can be swayed by a woman, a widow, by persistence, how much more can our God be trusted to act on the behalf of those in need? Let me tell you a little story to close. It lasts about that long. If you're asleep, come back. Here we go. A father sends his young son to bed. 5 minutes later, the little boy shouts downstairs, Daddy, can you bring me a cup of water? Father shouts back, no, you've already had your water. You go to sleep. 5 minutes later, the little boy shouts again, Daddy, please bring me a cup of water. You know how they do? The dad shouts back, son, I've already told you no water. You go to sleep. I don't want to hear it again. 5 minutes later, the little boy shouts back down, Daddy, will you bring me a cup of water? The dad shouts, son, I've already told you no. And if you ask for water again, I'm going to come up there and I'm going to give you a spanking. 5 minutes later, the little boy shouts, Daddy, when you come up here to give me a spanking, can you bring me a cup of water? Now, why do I use that to close? Well, here's why. Obviously, the path up and down those stairs between that father and that son, it was a clearly well-worn path. The son may not have fully understood the father, but the trust was clear, and the mutual love they had was deep, and it was apparent. And that's what Jesus hopes for us as well, you see. That in our relationship with God, that our prayers may make that path between us a well-worn, wide path, and that trust and mutual love may abound. So keep praying, folks. Never give up hope. And that's a truth you can safely believe. Amen.